Hello, and welcome to the Australian Autumn Music Podcast, in which we profile great music happening at the community level in Australia. I am your host, Gene Holland. The purpose of this podcast is to highlight the connecting of communities through Australian music and the importance of Australian music for children's and young people's performance. Australian Autumn Music is delighted to be profiling regional Victoria's Resonance String Orchestra. Resonance is a non-for-profit, community, multi-tiered string orchestra program open to young people and adults, from beginner to advanced musicians. Based in the Macedon Ranges, Resonance has 3 string orchestras, and their vision is to empower regional communities to make great music. They do this through playing at local events, engaging with community groups, and partnering with others, including visiting artists. Resonance values inclusivity and equity and embraces innovation, creativity, and fun in their program. On this episode, members of Resonance in the Woodend and Castlemaine orchestras sat down with founder and co-artistic director Heather Cummins to talk about their experiences playing new Australian music and working with a composer in residence.
So we are sitting here as a group of Resonance String Orchestra students members in Woodend, and we're here to have a chat about what it means to play music by Australian composers and arrangers. The group's got a lot of experience in this. We have a composer in residence with one of our music directors, Emma Wade, who writes regularly for the orchestra and arranges regularly for the orchestra. And we're also actively seeking out works by other Australian composers. And the first question that we're going to cover today is in response to meeting a composer whose work we've played. So I'm going to cross to Olivia, and she's going to respond to the question, what is it like to meet a composer whose music you've played?
Yeah. Okay. So I was lucky enough to visit Dindy Vaughan after we'd been spending several months, weeks, a long period of time learning a couple of her pieces, like as an orchestra between Woodend and Castlemaine. And me and a couple of other youth members went to meet Dindy Vaughan in her home, which was a beautiful place surrounded by nature, and you could really see the inspiration for her work from where she lived. From the interview, we really managed to gain insight into this incredible life she had lived, composing music for people that was inspired by the world she grew up in and inspired by her love for nature and her life's experiences. And I think that meeting her really helped us develop an understanding of the importance of the pieces themselves and the significance of making music about the Australian environment.
Wow, what a tremendous experience for young performers to meet a brilliant, active composer. Dindy also attended the Resonance concert in which her music was performed, and the orchestra members then discussed what they observed and gained from that experience.
So building on that, Will had the chance to interview Dindy Vaughan, who's Can't Put Out the Flames we performed last year in Resonance, and then we all had the pleasure of having Dindy in the audience for our performance of that work in the 2023 Deep Time annual concert for Resonance. So I'm just going to pose the question, did having Dindy present in the audience change our experience of playing the work, or being in conversation with Dindy about the work as we were learning it, did that enhance the experience for you?
Definitely talking to Dindy was an amazing experience, and I felt like it gave me a lot of insight into obviously the music, but just composing in general. And it was she made it very simple. She was talking to us about one of her new compositions about a dream, and she said, and in this composition the cello is the dreamer, and it's snoring, and it's long, slow strokes, and that's the breathing in and out. And I'm like, that is such a simple but effective way of that is such a simple and effective way of giving us the imagery which you were aiming for. But obviously you don't know the composer's intentions when they're making music. So to hear that was really interesting. And we didn't talk very much specifically about the Can't Put Out the Flame suite, and we didn't talk about it too closely, but I think just listening to her talk and listening to her speak about her connection to nature was really, really interesting, and it seemed to make the suite come a bit more alive after talking to her. It had a bit more meaning and a bit more, yeah.
And having her in the audience while we were playing, it challenges all of us to play our very best when you can look into the audience and see the composer there, and you know that it's their imaginative process that you're trying to honour, and that you're actually, bringing it to fruition, and there's an audience that are also participating in that process, hearing it for the first time. That was it's a much more immediate experience of the music, because you're playing something, it feels like it's almost forming it for the first time with the composer there. Yeah, it was great.
I feel like seeing Dindy in the audience really impacted me. I almost shed a little bit of a tear. Maybe I did shed a tear, actually, because I saw her jump up and she was clapping and smiling, and that's a really special and unique experience to have as a player. It's just like, wow, it's so real. And I think when you play pieces that are written by local artists, you feel more connected to them and you feel like you can relate to them a little bit more, which is really special. Yeah.
We will now hear an excerpt from Dindy Vaughan's You Can't Put Out the Flame suite, premiered by Resonance at their annual concert Deep Time in 2022. As Heather mentioned, Resonance Orchestra have a composer in residence, Emma Wade, who regularly writes for the orchestra. We will first hear from the orchestra members on their experiences working with Emma, and then from Emma herself on the collaborative process.
So this next question is for May, who's a viola player in the wood end branch of Resonance String Orchestra, and just wanting to get your perspective, May, on what it's like to have a composer in residence who works with the orchestra.
It's been really great to have Emma as she knows the orchestra, she knows the players in the orchestra, and she's able to just create things. She wrote a piece called The Reign of Fungi, I think it was, and it was just so moving. It was it felt like mushrooms coming out of the ground, and I really loved the way she works with the orchestra. She and we were able to produce something that was pretty amazing to listen, to play and to listen to as well. It was pretty amazing. So yes.
And who had solos created for them in that. So I'm going to cross to Julia, who's a violinist from Woodend, and in Il Regno dei Funghi, the Reign of Fungi piece, Julia actually had a solo written for her. What was that like?
It was really awesome having a solo written for me, and I think when it's written for you and like written like on a specific like land, you sort of feel like a deeper connection to it. Like, I don't know what to say.
That's good.
Yeah, I really loved the solo, and it was amazing to have Emma write it for us. And yeah, it was an amazing piece of music, and I think it was more amazing because of that it was written so close to us.
Yeah, so when we were playing Fungi, which was composed by Emma Wade, and she was conducting as we were rehearsing it, there was a real sense that the interpretation was growing from, the responses of the players to the music. We were talking about what particular bars were trying to, we're talking about what particular bars were trying to evoke, and what sorts of elements of nature were being brought out in them. And it was from those responses that then we were modifying the way we were playing the piece. And it was just a really nice sort of collaborative feeling with the composer being there.
I would say that I feel as though I interpret pieces and play them much better when I have very clear imagery. And I think we talked a lot about the imagery of the piece and just everything. People were just shooting ideas of what the music made them think of. I remember it might have been Emma thinking about this massive web of like connecting underneath the fungi, like as mushrooms do, connect their roots and all communicate and everything. And I think that was a very powerful image for me, and that just sort of excuse the pun, resonated with me, and really gave me a clear idea of what we were aiming for in the music.
I think for me, what was really special about working with Emma was just watching her face when we would play, because it's almost like her little baby that we were bringing to life, and it felt even a little bit emotional because she'd put all that work into it, and then we get to see it grow, and it was so special. It was a really special moment.
So Emma, just wondering if you'd like to talk about what it's like to be composer in residence for Resonance.
It's quite a tongue twister. It's a huge honour. It's incredibly exciting and incredibly wonderful to have a ready-made string orchestra on hand to try out new creations.
Emma, how does it influence your composing process to know the musicians and students that you're composing for?
You can very much tailor the music to their exact needs and requirements, which also means that you can be a lot more adventurous. And there's a lot of love that goes into that very personal compositional process as well.
Yeah, and that beautiful delight of seeing the works realised for the first time by kids who know that that solo actually has their name on it. Yeah.
Our journey now takes us to a place of old things and new things, with the world premiere of The Kingdom of Fungi, written by Emma Wade for this year's Resonance String Orchestra.
We will now hear from co-artistic director Heather on the importance of playing music by local composers, including Emma Wade as composer in residence.
I think it's really important for students to play music by local composers. I think it's important on a number of levels. It's necessary for them to understand music as a present, evolving art form that they can step into and be a part of in a variety of ways. It's important that they have a sense that the music that they play is connected to their local area. And it's important that they see different pathways that they can take in their own music making. So for them to actually be working with a composer in residence gives them that experience of what they might, where they might take their own music making, but it also gives them that immediate response of playing for a composer and seeing how it lands and seeing how talked through the different ways that they might interpret a phrase or realise a dynamic, and actually getting that instant feedback from the composer about the effect and whether they're realising that intention.
It is clear that having a composer in residence creates an exciting and dynamic partnership between the ensemble and the composer. But how about playing music by Australian composers in general? Is it important? The orchestra members share their experiences and opinions on this.
It's really important because we're an Australian orchestra, and if we just focused on pieces from the Northern Hemisphere, then none of them would ever truly reflect how we work and where we work and how we connect with the land that we're on and how that comes through in our sound. That can't ever quite do it in the same way that an Australian composer can.
I think it's also really important to be playing from Australian, especially local composers, because even just in our day-to-day lives we hear all these sounds in our environment and they're so familiar, and when you hear them in the music that you're playing from these composers, it's quite amazing because it's all familiar to you. Especially for the Dindy Vaughan bird suites, you hear all these bird sounds just when you're out in nature, and then hearing them come through in the music was quite amazing.
I think it's really important to play from Australian composers because, like Frida said, you can hear the music and you can hear all the nature in the music. And I think knowing what these birds sound like in the bird suite helped us to really play it like we were the birds, like we were in the forest or listening to the birds. Yeah, that was really special.
We can hear from the orchestra members' discussion that they value Australian music that reflects their location and history. Playing Australian and local music helps them build and reflect on their identities as individuals, members of their community, and as Australians. And these kinds of learnings and experiences no doubt influence the ideas for future projects from both the orchestra members and directors that we will hear about a little later in this episode. These include working with a local Indigenous elder to create a soundscape for their acknowledgement of country, and taking the collaborative composition process with Emma Wade to another level by incorporating improvisation from the orchestra members as an integral part of the process. Relating to this, the orchestra members were asked to consider whether the experience of meeting and working with a composer has encouraged them to try composition themselves.
I'm wondering about the effect of working so closely with composers and meeting them, whether that would encourage any of you to actually try composition. Do you think it has an effect on young musicians to actually see and meet composers and have a sense of, oh, that could be me, or that could be something that I could branch into with my music? This is crossing to Lucy for an answer.
Yeah, I guess when you actually meet the composer or someone that writes music, it doesn't feel so daunting, the idea of, writing music for people.
And Olivia.
Yeah, I think that I'm not looking particularly closely at going into music for the rest of my life, as a career, but the idea right now of writing a whole piece of music would be incredibly daunting. I would have no idea where to start, and seeing somebody actually go through that process, particularly for a group that I'm already involved in would definitely just increase, like my understanding of what that actually takes. And I think that would be good to understand what it takes to make the music that's all around us.
I think that seeing people and meeting people who compose music makes it feel more achievable and more real.
I think it was very inspiring to see someone who is so passionate about composing and making music. And like I said before, I think Dindy's connection to nature and Emma's connection to nature was really, really special. And I think maybe not so much, well, I don't know at this point about about composition or anything like that, because I haven't decided if I want to yet. But I think improvisation definitely is really something which can be impacted by nature as well. And I think it definitely has inspired me to do more improvisation, and impacted by the surroundings and just everything in your everyday life, but especially the natural world is very special and very important, I think.
It's interesting to hear and to think about how nature sounds so musical already, but it's not in musical dictation, and how we can use musical dictation to make it sound like nature. Yeah.
As alluded to earlier, the discussion now turns to ideas from the orchestra and orchestra members for future projects with local composers, some inspired by projects already undertaken by the orchestra.
Do any of you have any ideas about what next for Resonance in terms of playing music by local composers? Ideas for future projects that we could undertake?
I loved doing the music inspired by the birds and like the noises in nature. I think that was really cool. It'd be cool to do something like that again.
We played the viola duo by Ross Edwards, right. And it had sounds of cicadas and things, and it really it was pretty amazing. And for me, I played it with Beata, and it was just took me into another world, and was just amazing to be able to play it. So we have through the Resonance, we have opportunities like this to play music that is written by Australian composers, and just all composers, but especially Australian composers. It's very, very special.
I think it would also be really fun if we could play more pieces that are written specifically for us, because that's always such an really incredible experience, and it's such an honour. And because when a piece is written for you, then it fits so much better, and it's so much easier to play, and it always sounds perfect because it is perfect for us. I think if we could do more of that, that would be great.
During COVID, we had Zoom sessions of orchestra, and Emma took us through sort of improvising and therefore creating our own music. So I suppose that was sort of an introduction to being able to create our own music, and maybe we could do more of that in the orchestra.
Yeah, we were talking before about long ago in Resonance's history, maybe 2011, having the Melbourne-based composer Andrea Keeble come to the orchestra and work with him on creating a series of motifs, and all of the orchestra members contributed sounds and ideas and little phrases that Andrea then worked into a full-scale piece called Ominous Moon for the orchestra to perform. So it sounds like there's an appetite for returning to that sort of project again. Inga?
I think it'd be really special to have a piece that Resonance writes our own piece. I think it would be really cool to have Emma and others help us to like create our own music, and it could just be some improvisation, but I think that would be really fun to try out and try.
One of the ideas that we're playing around with at the moment is working with a local Indigenous elder to create a soundscape accompaniment to our acknowledgement of country that we give at the start of every performance. Just wanting to canvass your thoughts on that idea.
I think this is a really amazing idea to be able to, as an orchestra, show how we can acknowledge the history of the land we're making music on, and how we draw what's like in the land into our own playing.
Also, because music has been made on this land for thousands of years, I think it's really quite special to have an acknowledgement of country with music to just enhance it a bit, and
Thank you for listening. Australian Autumn Music would like to thank Resonance String Orchestra and co-artistic director Heather Cummins for their partnership on this podcast. We would like to thank orchestra members May, Jane, Ovoki, Will, Frida, Lucy, Inga, Julia, Olivia, Lucia, and Emma for sharing their thoughts and experiences with us. If you would like to learn more about Resonance or any of their upcoming events, you can visit their website at www.resonancestringorchestra.org.au. The orchestra is open to new enrolments. If you are a music educator or composer interested in writing or arranging for children's performance, we also have a wonderful free online lecture recording by composer and University of Sydney music education lecturer Dr. Jim Coyle. Dr. Coyle goes through the foundations of writing for children and specific technical requirements for most instruments that they learn in Australia. The lecture is on YouTube, and the title is A Guide for Music Educators and Composers Writing Music for Children's Performance. We will leave you with another excerpt from Dindy Vaughan's You Can't Put Out the Flame suite from Resonance's Deep Time concert.